Hello everyone, and welcome to the 17th Drugstore Culture vodcast. And I feel all of our vodcasts are special, but I feel that this one is a special Drugstore Culture vodcast because we're putting it up on the site on the day that the new movie Stan and Ollie comes out, and we have a guest with us, Pamela Hutchinson, who is very much an expert on early cinema and silent cinema, and one of our finest writers, to talk about Stan and Ollie in general. I should say, before we kick off, I'm Pete Hoskin. I'm the Deputy Editor of Drugstore Culture. And Pamela, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm Pamela Hutchinson, and I write about films, especially silent films, I think. But, all kinds of movies. I do a lot of film history and film criticism.
You have a wonderful blog.
I have a website where you can read all about silent cinema. It's called silentlondon.co.uk, and it's full of the best information about silent cinema around.
And you also have a wonderful book about Pandora's Box.
Yeah, so very different in tone and theme and everything to what we're talking about today, but a great silent film called Pandora's Box, starring the beautiful Louise Brooks. I wrote a monograph about the film for the BFI Film Classics series, which was great fun.
It's very good. And you have another book coming out soon, I understand, but we can talk about that later. I feel like I'm forcing your biography onto you.
No, it's absolutely, you need to know where I went to school.
We are, of course, actually here to talk about Stan and Ollie, both the new movie and also the two actors.
Yeah.
But I'd like to start with a disclaimer, which is that I haven't seen Stan and Ollie, the movie. I was very, very keen to, and I was all set to join the London Film Festival. There was a preview screening then, but I had to go away, and then I fell ill for many, many weeks. So I'm yet to catch up with it. I'm very excited too.
Yeah, I highly recommend you do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really... I was lucky enough to see it, actually, just before the festival, and it's a really, really moving film, actually. It's very... it's almost quite bittersweet in tone throughout the whole thing, although you do have the comedy, and Steve Coogan plays Stan Laurel, and John C. Reilly plays Oliver Hardy, and they are brilliant at mimicking the actors that they're playing and their little routines that seep into their everyday conversations. But actually... there's a sense of nostalgia and loss about the film, which sort of works a little bit of magic on you. It starts in 1953, I think, or 1954, when they're doing their British tour, and there's a sense that their career is behind them. All the punters in the theatre foyer say things like, "Aren't they dead?" and "Who's playing Laurel and Hardy?" It's all, everywhere, exactly, everywhere in the cinemas, it's Abbott and Costello who've taken over. So there's a sense that everybody thinks their best days are behind them, but when they get on stage, they start reclaiming that magic, and the audiences start feeling it too. And it's just an incredibly moving film about a very long-lasting friendship, really.
The strange thing is, to have audiences saying that to them. Was that true that they received that sort of a response?
I mean, I think it was true that they struggled to fill halls at the beginning of that tour, and the idea that they were trying to get film projects off the ground and things like that. And it's a long time. There'd been several years since they were on everyone's movie screens all the time. They obviously were making films, but there's a sense that you're sort of coming into cold Britain at the dog days of rationing, and here we have people who seem to be yesterday's stars turning up and trying to attract audiences, and the two men, Stan and Ollie, obviously feel that too. They're coming to the end of their physical life as well.
It just seems strange now, though, because I hate using the word iconic about anything, really. But I think Laurel and Hardy have reached that realm. We're familiar with the bowler hats, with the tatty suits, and with their routine as well. And obviously, Stan and Ollie is coming out. That they have a legacy. Yeah. They're known now. I watched not all of their films, but a lot of their movies when I was young, when I was a child, and I loved them. And they still play so well today. In fact, I was struck yesterday, Kim, who is our videographer, hello Kim,
Hi.
She was cutting a montage of Laurel and Hardy clips for the site.
How do you begin?
Well, there's that, but she managed it. It's very, very good. And all I could hear was laughter coming from a corner of the room. And I think, Kim, you were surprised, I think, by how much you liked them. and how funny they still are. You know, I mean, why have they stuck?
Well, I mean, they stick, you know, this is very basic. They stick to a very popular template of the double act who are sort of physically mismatched. The first sort of movie double act were a Danish double act, a comedy double act really, were a double act from Denmark called Ole and Axel, better known as Pat and Patachon, who had the very short guy and the very tall guy. So when Hal Roach and Liam McCarey put together Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, they knew this was going to work. Yeah. The thing that breaks them apart from other double acts, the thing that makes them unique, I think, is they don't really play the straight man role. Yeah. Either of them can play the straight man. So, I mean, I think it's delightful that you said that you've been laughing and enjoying Laurel and Hardy since you were a child. I remember watching Laurel and Hardy when I was little, and it was a very unsettling experience. I found them very disturbing characters, and actually very anxiety-ridden, and I think that's what makes their comedy work. When I was little, they were on TV, and they were these mysterious figures who were sometimes real, but black and white, and sometimes animated, but in colour, which fundamentally showed me I could not trust these two people at all. They weren't even, you know,
they crossed media.
They weren't even honest about who they were. Are they real or not? And then you'd watch the films and you'd be laughing, and then suddenly you'd be horribly upset because something terrible would happen to Oliver Hardy, or you know, they'd drop something, or whatever they were trying to do would go so badly wrong. I'd be so scared about the precarious positions that they got themselves into, and I still find that watching them today. I find it funny, but also very painful and almost melancholic. I mean, look at Stan Laurel's little baby face, or Oliver Hardy when he's absolutely exasperated and has no recourse but to look at the camera and say, "Look what's happening to me! I'm being tormented by this fool."
I guess I'm obviously a less empathetic person because I've always found them just sort of uncomplicatedly funny and likeable. But I guess as well, maybe I think there's something in the friendship that they show on screen. I think they're often shown as adversarial. You know, Stan Laurel, you know, crying, as you mentioned, which is heartbreaking. He's got one of the best crying faces in movies. But also, you know, we're familiar with Oliver Hardy's sort of exasperated look to camera. But at the same time, it does strike me. I watched some of the shorts this week that they do they stick together, obviously, and they always help each other out at the end. You know, there is always another adversary. Yes. And they team up without even a word said. They know what to do, and they take on that problem together. And I've always found that kind of heartening. It
is. And, you know, I think that it shows what true friendship is, you know. No matter how much the other person might irritate you or might not be, you know, the optimal person to help you get a piano up some stairs. Clearly, the worst person you could possibly choose to help you get a piano up some stairs. You know, you'll stick with them. And, you know, it resets at the beginning of the next film. They're still pals again, even if they're hiding from each other or whatever. And as you say, there's always an adversary. And there's always someone else they can team up against.
You just mentioned getting a piano upstairs, and that makes me think, you know, the music box and others. But we should probably mention some actual film titles. You know, where would you start with? Where would you recommend that people start with Laurel and Hardy?
Oh gosh, you see, so I'm much more familiar with the silent films, which sounds like an obscure thing to say, but actually they're beautiful short films. They're just so hilarious. I think that you can't go wrong with Big Business, where I mean, it starts off surreal anyway because they're selling Christmas trees in California in bright sunshine, and also it ends with one of the most thorough destructions of a property that they've ever committed. And you know, one of the great things about Laurel and Hardy is they always escalate the joke. So they're destroying this man's house and it gets worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, Hal Roach put out the story that he hired a house for them to do the film in, and that accidentally they filmed the whole thing in the house next door, so that they broke the wrong house. I mean, obviously it's not true, but I love the way that the escalation of the joke continues outside the film. I also really like Liberty. I think that's fantastic. I mean, if you want to go back to basics, the very first film they properly teamed up in, the real first Laurel and Hardy film, is Putting Pants on Philip, which is great because it plays on the transatlantic relationship as well, where Stan Laurel appears as a Scottish chap in a kilt who arrives in America to meet his American uncle, and yes, the word pants obviously refers to trousers. They need to get him out of his kilt. Great. And if you ever get a chance, I just have to say one more. The pie fight, just this one sequence alone, the pie fight from the Battle of the Century, fundamentally shows you that slapstick comedy can be sophisticated. It can push your empathy, as you were saying earlier, but it can be like a ballet in the way that it is choreographed and beautiful and ultimately hilarious. I defy anyone not to laugh at that sequence.
Yeah, agreed. I'm so glad you mentioned Big Business, because I think it's archetypal, Laurel and Hardy. You're right with the destruction, and things just get worse and worse and worse and worse. But also it contains one of their regular cast of contributors and colleagues, James Finlayson, who is in my favourite Laurel and Hardy film, which is from the Sound era. So maybe I can balance it out a bit.
Yes.
So that's Way Out West.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favourite comedies of all time.
It's a beautiful film, really. Yeah. Stan and Ollie actually begins when they're filming that film, and there's this wonderful moment where the two actors are talking to each other, and suddenly they just walk onto set and do the dance from Way Out West, and it's that's what we call movie magic. It's beautiful. I understand you're a keen dancer yourself.
We shouldn't have talked before recording this episode. I am not a keen dancer in general, but it is one of my ambitions. I would like to learn the dance from Way Out West and perform it one day. So I need to find a willing friend, or if anyone out there would like to learn the dance from Way Out West with me, I'd be very happy.
You need some ill-fitting clothes. So what is it about that dance particularly? Because it is beautiful, but
I think it's just the absurdity of it, really. It comes from basically nowhere, as does the other great musical sequence in Way Out West, which is them singing the Trail of the Lonesome Pine. And those two moments are absolutely two of my favourite moments in cinema. And if I'm ever feeling a bit down, if I can just watch those, and I will be cheered up. And that's not hyperbole, it's true. Obviously it depends on how down I am, it can cure most maladies, I feel. And
Oliver Hardy has such a beautiful voice. He was a singer before he got into films, and it's such a treat for him to be able to unleash it.
If you don't know his biography, that's one of the surprising things, because in Way Out West it's beautiful singing on his part, and then obviously you've got the funny rasping singing alongside him of Stan Laurel that becomes even funnier.
Isn't always Stan Laurel, I don't think.
True.
Don't want to spoil the joke, but
but I think I love both of those sequences just because they come from more or less nowhere. And that should be a problem.
No,
but it's not.
It's not at all.
They arrive in this western town, and they just hear some guys singing the Avalon Brothers, I think, singing a little ditty, and they dance along to it. It's simple and it's so joyous.
It is joyous. It's like the dance at the end of the Music Box, or they had this ability to bring something light out of nowhere, and a lot of those comedy films from the 1930s have very poorly integrated musical sequences. I think one of the things I love in Way Out West is the sort of white magic, Stan Laurel called it, the absurdity, magic, humour, and of course there's the moment when Stan Laurel lights a pipe with his thumb. And if you don't know this scene, they're smoking, and Oliver Hardy wants a light, and Stan Laurel a flame appears at the end of his thumb, and the fact that it's never mentioned that he has a flaming thumb, and it's obviously more infuriating to Oliver Hardy than it is a spectacle of wonder. And I think it comes back in another of their films. It's hard to imagine them without the magic at their fingertips.
They certainly were recurring gags.
Yes.
So they're obviously very funny.
They are funny, I will grant you that.
They are very good together. Would you say that they were innovators?
I think that they took something that could be done almost in quite a slapdash way. Now, I watch a lot of silent film, I watch a lot of silent comedy.
You do.
And let me tell you that not all silent comedy is at the level of Laurel and Hardy or Buster Keaton or whatever. And there are many other sort of double acts and things, but there's something beautiful and very precise about what Laurel and Hardy do, and I think they set a standard that said, you can do knockabout comedy, and you can do even franchise comedy, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be absolutely brilliant quality. As you see in Stan and Ollie, for example, Stan Laurel was the brains of the outfit, constantly writing new material, and so they always pushed something a little bit further. I think, once they went into the sound era, the dialogue that they have, it can be quite simple and functional, but every so often it's blindingly surreal. What has Muhammad got to do with my wife and all this kind of thing, whereas Stan Laurel's replies don't make any sense. They only make sense in a kind of free association way. So I think you can see the absurdity and the excellence in what they do. And you can take it all the way through to Abbott Costello. You can even take it all the way through to Waiting for Godot if you want to. You know, there really is something, as you say, deathless about that appeal.
Or I feel you can take it to Reeves and Mortimer. You know,
absolutely.
You can bring it right forward to now, I think.
And that's the joy, I think. You know, Reeves and Mortimer, I was watching them over Christmas, and the idea that they go from one joke to another joke, even if it doesn't follow, because they just want to keep doing the jokes that they seem like they're in the bag, you know, and that's what Stan and Laurel did. Stan and Laurel, that's what Laurel and Hardy did. I mean, you know, obviously Stan Laurel was the Brit, so we're very much on his side, but it was Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy.
That it was. One of the things where I think they were very successful, and you've alluded to it, is they made the crossover from silent to sound cinema. And I know that among Laurel and Hardy fans there's this eternal debate, which was better, the silent films or the sound films. I come down on the side of sound, because I think, I mean, literally, they played around with sound. We've talked about it with Way Out West. You know, they did musical routines, but I think more than that, it's just their voices. I think, you know, Stan Laurel, his crying face, where he looks at the camera and he looks so sad, the poor man. And that's wonderful as a silent gag. I just feel it's even better with the whimpering that you get with sound. And you know me, I love my silent cinema. So this is not a knock on silent film, but I do feel they added something, and they did experiment with sound, which I thought was very successful.
I love the use of sound effects, you know, and things like that. And they've got their little theme tune. They had their little catchphrases as well. It's another nice mess you've gotten me into, and all that kind of thing, which obviously is very famous, if misquoted. I still slightly retreat back to the silent cinema.
You surprised me.
And partly it's to do with the fact that, you know, every Laurel and Hardy film I see basically comes to me like an anxiety nightmare. And so it's very painful to watch, as much as it's funny. Maybe I have too much empathy for cartoonish blokes I see on screen, but I find that, you know, a little goes a long way. So to me, a 20-minute short Laurel and Hardy, at that point, my emotions are almost entirely, you know, expended. So I pretty much get through a double bill of shorts, and I'm exhausted by Laurel and Hardy. And, you know, that's only a compliment. Of course, when you watch Stan and Ollie, you'll see so many of their sound routines. It's a little bit of a greatest hits. And I am wavering on that. So maybe if you work on me a little bit.
The other great joy of their silent era, though, is I always feel that they feel like a connective tissue between different things and different people, particularly in that early moment. You know, Stan Laurel was an understudy for Charlie Chaplin. Yeah, so they both came from the Fred Karno troupe. Which is basically where American comedy comes from. Exactly. And then all these other names, Leo McGarry and Hal Roach, we mentioned, but also some important women. I think their names crop up. There's another one of the regular Laurel and Hardy contributors is Mae Bush. She's in some very fine. She's in actually another classic double pairing of shorts, both sound ones, is Them Thar Hills and Tit for Tat. Yes, Tit for Tat, obviously basically expressing their entire modus operandi. We should probably talk about that actually. So Tit for Tat is one of their short films. It's got Mae Bush in it. She plays the wife of the person who plays the antagonist in this film. And Tit for Tat sums up about 80% of their routines, and you've already mentioned it, the escalation, but it's a specific type of escalation, and it's the escalation where I would punch you in the face, for example, and then I would break your legs. Exactly. And then this is a violent version of it. And then I would steal your chair, and then you would break my house down, and then you'd knock over my Ribena here, and so on and so on and so on, and it'd end with this entire room destroyed and both of us with black eyes. And this, even that, I feel Laurel and Hardy were involved in that story, because I don't know if you've come across it, but this was apparently came out of a party that Leo McCarey was at. Okay, so Leo McCarey, one of the great directors, and he was supervising director on many of the early Laurel and Hardy shorts, and apparently he was at a Hollywood party trying to do up his bow tie. And Mabel Normand, we will get onto Mabel Normand because you wrote a wonderful piece about her for us. She came up to him and just messed up his bow tie that had been working on for ages. Everyone found this very funny, and Leo McCarey turned around, and I forget exactly what he did, but it was similar to cutting off the end of someone's tie, and eventually everyone started ripping each other's clothes. So this was apparently a true story.
That sounds like a hell of a party.
It does sound like a hell of a party.
Wow,
But
there's Hollywood types.
It exactly describes a Laurel and Hardy routine.
Yeah.
And McGarry was so taken with what happened that he brought it into the films. I don't know whether all of that is true or not.
I want it to all be true, every single moment of it. And also that means that Mabel Normand invented it then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, well, exactly. So, but the point being that, you know, whether it's true or not, there are all these connections between Laurel and Hardy and Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy and Mabel Normand, Laurel and Hardy and Mae Bush.
Oliver Hardy worked with so many people. He was in so many silent comedies before he partnered with Stan Laurel. You know, he was the cinema guy. He worked a lot with Charlie Chase, for example.
Yeah.
You know, he's a great comic, and you'll often see when you're watching any other silent comedy, Oliver Hardy in the background, or just opening a door or something. You think, come forward. But yeah, he had his moment in the sun eventually.
Yeah. Because you wrote that piece on Mabel Normand,
yes.
we should probably I would like to talk about female
Yeah.
comedian stars and whether there are any double acts, because this is one of the great sadnesses of film history, is that, as you have said, many female silent stars, and particularly female comedians, were forgotten.
Yeah.
And that's being rectified slowly now.
Oh, completely. I feel like this is a great moment for the slapstick comedian.
Yeah.
Lots of work has been done, lots of great books are being written, and lots of screenings. And I had the absolute joy, I think it was early last year, of introducing a programme at the BFI South Bank of female silent and early sound comedy double acts. And I've never seen NFT1 in such fits of laughter. It was absolutely a brilliant afternoon, and you know, people went away and wrote about it, and it was great. It's not my curation, so I can't take any credit. I just happened to be the person explaining it beforehand. So obviously, double acts were popular, and Laurel and Hardy among them, and so people wanted to replicate this. So one of the most famous, I suppose, in the silent era would be Marion Byron and Anita Garvin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always get their names mixed up, who you can see in one of the funniest films ever made in the history of the world, almost as funny as a Laurel and Hardy film, called A Pair of Tights, which is very similar in that they are trying to achieve one simple task. They're trying to buy, or rather get two gentlemen to buy them ice cream, and it keeps going wrong, and it's beautiful. And also, going into the sound era, have a much more long-running partnership, which would be Thelma Todd, beautiful blonde Thelma Todd, and Zazu Pitts, who's just divinely hilarious. And
I should say as well, a wonderful DVD set of their works was released last year in America. I have it on my pile at home, but they're wonderful. Yeah, they're so wonderful.
It's so funny, and it's just exactly the same thing of seeing friendship explored through vicious slapstick comedy as well. And they are very close. They're very different, but they're very close. And they go up against hardships, and everything is hilarious. But at the end, it's all forgotten. And they are beautiful films.
Yeah. Pamela, I think that brings us to the end of our conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
Unless there's anything else you'd like to...
Well, I'd just like to say that this is another nice mess you've gotten me into.
Gosh, I should have seen that coming.
Yeah.
And before we go as well, would you just say a bit about... I know you have a book coming out in March, and it looks very, very good.
If I have to plug it, I will. I was really excited to be part of a project. I edited a book last year called 30 Second Cinema. It's a beautiful book, a hardback, illustrated book, but very reasonably priced. It's basically a guide to film history, world cinema. It's all in short 30-second sections, so you can read a little bit about Italian neorealism over here, a little bit about film noir over here, a potted history of Agnes Varda over there. I had some great writers to work with. The illustrations are beautiful. I recommend everyone buy it, and it's out by Ivy Press.
Cool.
So on the 14th of March.
Okay, we will all look out for it then, and I will certainly be buying a copy. So that's at least one.
Oh, phew.
Cool. Thanks so much, Pamela.
Thank you.